Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live streaming video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This hearing is to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. The process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may arise or exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant and authorized agent must contact the Secretary-Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca, and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, please call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. The phone and number is also posted on the screen below the live stream page at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. You will be asked to provide your name and address and item that you wish to address. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, the Secretary-Treasurer will unmute you when it is your time to speak. The applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of their application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for the presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their name and address for the record, and 5 minutes will be provided for each presentation. All remarks and questions will be directed to the chair, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns found in staff report, particularly with the proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for the decision, and this will mark the end of all discussion. Any person desiring a notice of decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through the email, to the Secretary-Treasurer. Only applicants, specified persons, and public bodies may appeal decisions in respect of applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Ontario Land Tribunal. A notice of appeal may be filed by any other individual person or unincorporated association or group. A notice of appeal may not be filed by any other individual person, unincorporated association or group. Written notice of the committee's decision will then be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consents to the applicant and or agent and any other person who has filed a written request for such a notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, only the applicant, specified persons, or public bodies may appeal this to the Ontario Land Tribunal. The last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed timeframe, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who has received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in this hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and other people participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. We have one regret, Mr. Michael Talowski. And do I have any declarations of pecuniary interests? I see none. I will be taking requests for deferrals or withdrawals of applications at this time. Madam Secretary-Treasurer, has anyone raised their hand?
Through Madam Chair, Ms. Stephanie Matilda, she wants to speak in regards to the application.
Very well. Good evening, Ms. Mativa. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm here tonight to request a deferral for application CAB A047-2022 for 135 Douglas Avenue. 135 Douglas Avenue.
Okay, yes, CAV 047 of 2022. That was deferred from March the 22nd.
Correct.
Okay. So in light of the unfavorable comments by town, you're looking to amend your application?
We are. We're looking to have the opportunity to speak further with town staff and come back with a revised application at a future date.
Very well. We do have 2 letters of concern from neighbors at Mr. Warren Collier at 122 Watson Avenue and a Richard and W. June Hetherington at 131 Douglas Avenue. I know you've received those, so I urge you to reach out to the neighbors and before your next application. And for the interested parties, please note that the application will be resubmitted at a later time and you will get notice before so. Members, I'm in your hands. All those agreeing with the request for a deferral. Okay, the application has been deferred. Thank you, Ms. Maviva. You'll see the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, has anyone else raised their hand? Madam Secretary Treasurer?
We do have Mr. Peter Giordano.
Okay,
He wants to
good evening,
defer
Mr. Giordano. How are you?
Good evening, Madam Chair. I'm doing great, thank you.
Good. Which application are you here for?
Item number 6.1, it's A011 103 North Forester Park Drive.
Yes, okay, very well. And you're also seeking a deferral in light of the comments by staff.
That is correct.
Okay, we do have your 5 letters of support on hand. The same people, I guess, will be notified, and at that time you can resubmit when you're ready to see the Secretary Treasurer.
Perfect, thank you.
All those in support of a deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred, none opposed. Thank you. Have a good evening. Yeah. Anyone else? Good evening.
Good evening,
Which
Madam
application
Chair.
are you here for?
This is for application CAV A0152023.
Very well. This is at 61 Chancery Lane.
That is correct.
Okay, accessory building interior yard setback. Okay, again, you'll see the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready to resubmit, and I'm assuming that's regarding the, excuse me, I apologize. That's what we have to put up with when we're working from home. I apologize. You're going to see the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready. I'm assuming this is to deal with the comments from staff, correct?
That is correct. We'd like to request a deferral.
Very well. All those in support of a deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred, none opposed. You'll see the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Have a good evening. Oh. Once again, the phone number to call is 905-815-6095. If you're interested in speaking to a matter in this agenda, please call that number, 905-815-6095, and staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instruction to join the video conferencing at that time. The first item of our agenda tonight is CAV 012 of 2023 at 1477 Duncan Road. Again, it's CAV 012 of 2023 at 1477 Duncan Road. We do have one letter of objection, actually two letters of objection sent in by interested neighbors, a Ms. Oyang Menji and a Ms. Cheryl. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, committee. My name is Raad Rawi from Professional Floor Plans at 4183 Loyalist Drive, Mississauga, Ontario, L5L3W3. I present the owner as an agent for this application.
Good evening, Mr. Rawi. Go ahead. Did you send in an application? Sorry, a presentation?
I mean, it's the same. It's a simple case. Mostly, it's technical. If we can go to the basement plan. Yeah. So the basement plan. No, the next one. Oh, so the plans are not here in in the committee of adjustment. So let's go back to the site plan. The rear part of the property was an uncovered porch, which was unexcavated. Then the client decided to excavate this part to add an extra storage to the basement. Nothing changed to the footprint, nothing changed to the heights, nothing changed to the house area, nothing changed to the floor area ratio. But as per the zoning bylaw, as this area is being added to the basement and the top level of the floor is above the natural grade, it will be added to the lot coverage. And this is why it's exceeded the allowed lot coverage. The staff looked at it and found it meeting the 4 test, and they support us. We had 2 letters of objection. One letter is not related to this issue. It's related to the neighbor wants to make sure that, you know, the fence when constructed will be at the property line, not at his property. And the other one has 3 or 4 comments related mainly understanding what's the status of why this came in after building the house. And she was worried that if the house was increased or enlarged in size, why this happened. And she had concern regarding the advertisement of the house as a living space, including the basement area added to the area, which is not in line with the floor area ratio. My client, the owner, reached out today to both neighbors, and he talked to them, both of them, explained to them what's going on. And Cheryl, the one, she had many comments. She's satisfied and she's not joining the call today for sure. And he said, I think the other neighbor also is satisfied and he understands what's going on. And for sure, I mean, there will be a legal survey done for the fence, for everything, and it's all will be within what is required by the neighbors. But there are nothing related to the philosophy or the reason for this variance in their concerns that need further explanation. So basically, to make it short, it's the rear part of the basement part. It is added as a cold room, as a storage, and this triggered the increase in the coverage.
Okay, very well. Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions of Mr. Arawi at this time from the committee members? Okay, I see none. Has anyone raised their hands or called in to speak to this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
There is no phone calls at this time, but if you can just repeat again that anybody can call or raise their hands if they want to speak.
Okay. If there's anyone who's in attendance who would like to speak to this application, please raise your hand at this time. Okay, if there has been none, then we'll take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, the submitted drawings, and having heard the presentation of the applicant, which addressed the identified concerns and questions from the two letters received with respect to this matter, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to two conditions, those being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan, revision number 6, dated 2022-06-15, and elevation drawings, revision number 3, dated July 2022 15th.
Okay. Very well. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed. Thank you, Mr. Rawi. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good, wonderful evening. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Application CAV 013 of 2023 at 246 Tweedsdale Crescent. Again, it's CAV 013 of 2023 at 246 Tweedsdale Crescent. If there's anyone who's interested in speaking to this application, please raise your hand and you'll be invited to speak. Or alternatively, call 905-815-6095. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Raj Rai, and this is my wife, Marina. We're the homeowners at 246 Tweedsdale, so CAVA 0132023. We're just requesting two variances. So if we start at that first slide there. Sure. What's up? So this is just a 3D render, and then these are our, we can go to the next slide. These are our two variances that we're requesting. The first is for the garage total floor area, and then the second is for the lot coverage area, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail. So the next slide, please. So this is just the site plan. I guess it's a little bit spread out there, but basically it's just we have no front or back variances or side variances, no height variances, and no protected trees will be removed. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this shows the first variance that we're requesting, which is the garage floor area. If you can see on the left there, it shows that just from the streetscape, it's a equivalent to just a two-car garage, and the added area is to the rear. There is a rear entrance to the backyard and then one into the mudroom. The intent, obviously, of this garage floor area is to prevent the garage from being a visually dominant feature of the dwelling. And based on our proposed design, the garage is not visible. So the added part of the garage is not visible from the street and will not be a visually dominant feature of the dwelling or impact the streetscape, which should meet the intent of the zoning bylaw. So next slide, please. Variance number 2 is for the total lot coverage. So for our zoning, it's 25%, which would be 265.33 meters squared. We're requesting 27.4%, which is 289.89 meters squared. So basically, the difference is 24.62 meters. So that's a total of 265 square feet. If you see the floor plan on the left there, I've circled our rear covered porch. So that's 278.12 square feet, and that accounts for more than the difference there. So that's the reason why the lot coverage is increased. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this is just some of the Committee of Adjustments decisions in the same neighborhood recently. So the last two, one is just a few houses up, so 253 Tweedsdale, similar to 25% coverage that it's allowed, and they were given 29.73, which is a 4.73% change. And the one prior to that was on Sedgwick, which is was approved for 31.52%. So that's a 6.52% change, and we're requesting the 2.4. There's also surrounding area lot coverage analysis. So again, the Tweedsdale, that same street, as well as Sandwell, which is circular around, which we'll show on the next slide. So 31 to 36% building coverage on these areas. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this shows Tweedsdale as well as Sandwell and that Sedgwick, so that you can see the surrounding area, that this area is all within one zoning area there. And next slide, please. So this shows that surrounding neighborhoods. You can see that there are many dwellings that are similar to what we're proposing. This is just a few. Obviously, there are some that are going to be original, more bungalow or 1.5 or 2-story, but there's certainly maybe 60-40 split of these newer homes in this area. So the next slide, please. So for this variance too, the intent is so that the lot coverage is to prevent the construction of a dwelling with a mass or scale that appears larger than the dwellings in the surrounding neighborhood, and to ensure adequate open space. As you can see, our dwelling on our proposal is similar to the surrounding area. The dwelling doesn't appear larger than the other in the area. In fact, it's actually smaller than several in the area. So next slide, please. So in conclusion, we request the requested variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaws. They are in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. Further, the variances are minor in nature and appropriate for the development of the site, as there's no negative impact on the abutting properties or the streetscape. And we feel that these variances satisfy the 4 tests of the Planning Act and represent good planning. So we're happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the town's assessment, in reviewing your application, they identified that there are 2 variances that are missed, primarily the encroachment into the minimum yard width from the window well, and then the fireplace projection. So what is your plan with that respect?
Yeah, so we already sent some emails back. So we've already adjusted the fireplace so that complies. The window wells, it's a little bit difficult to get back and forth in the short notice. It's Monday, but our designer has been in contact with zoning already, and we will ensure that those both comply.
Okay. When you say sent, who did you send them to? To the planners for the variance application, or just
so the initial?
So Mr. Hassan is aware?
So we sent back to the Committee of Adjustment request, and then our designer has actually discussed with the zoning officer. Our planner has discussed with them, but it's obviously there's only one. Monday was the day off, so there's only.
No, I understand that. Mr. Hassan.
Hi, Madam Chair. This is my file. My name is Colin Westerhoff.
Oh, hi, Mr. Westerhoff. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Okay, so I guess my question will go to you. Are you satisfied with the communication that the applicant has made thus forth? Because when we do tie the recommendation and the decision to the conditions, their plans will not match the plans that we have with this application.
Right, so both of those missed variances can be addressed. So I haven't received anything to date from the applicant, but both of them can be addressed through the building permit stage, which goes through a zoning approval as well. So that they could have sent it to the zoning officer who's reviewing them. But as long as the plans are approved to the satisfaction of the director of planning, it should be all right. But these are sort of small technical changes that can occur sort of outside of this Committee of Adjustment process.
So within the condition, it would be best to put it to the satisfaction of Director of Planning and not tie it to the plans dated December the 12th, 2022?
Yes, you could do that. The 2 variances wouldn't substantially change or fundamentally change what is being requested and essentially the development that would occur. But you could tie it to the Director of Planning Services if you'd like to.
Very well. Thank you for that clarification. All right. Is there anyone who's raised their hand or called in to speak to the matter, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
Not at this time. I do
Very
see
well.
some. Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair. I do see some present in attendance, but nobody raised their hands. I'm just going to repeat that if they want to speak in regards to this application, they need to raise their hands.
Okay. If there's anyone who's interested in speaking to this application at 246 Tweesdale Crescent, please raise your hand and the Secretary General will invite you to speak. Okay. If no one has raised their hand, we'll take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Flemington. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having reviewed the applicant's written submission, excuse me, as well as the town's written staff report. Also having taken into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening, noting that there were no written or oral objections from the public with regards to this application, I am prepared to make a motion that we approve the application with the following two conditions. I find that there, just know that I find that there was no negative impact from the variances that have been requested. I do find that it's minor in nature and that it does meet the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaws. I will move that the dwelling with the following two conditions, that the dwelling be constructed to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Act, as well as that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Application CAV 014 of 2023 at 326 Sandhurst Drive. Again, this is application CAV 014 of 2023 at 326 Sandhurst Drive. If you're interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. If you are already on the meeting, please raise your hand to speak to the item on the agenda. Good evening, Mr. Temchak. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, members of the committee. Can you hear me tonight?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. I have prepared a brief presentation for tonight's meeting.
I think this one belongs to the one before.
This one is mine,
no.
but this is just the site plan. I know I sent in yesterday. I sent in just a quick PowerPoint.
Just give staff a minute.
No problem. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So yes, it's a very brief presentation tonight. So yes, my name is Paul Demchek with Vittori Urban Planning and Project Management. I'm the planning consultant on behalf of the applicant for 326 Sandhurst Drive in Oakville. So the subject property is currently occupied by a single detached dwelling with a detached garage. And my client does seek to improve the property with the construction of a new single detached dwelling. Next slide, please. So there is one variance before the committee this evening. So the application pursues the approval to permit a variance for an increase of lot coverage from 25 to 28.37%. Next slide, please. And I would note, so I've taken the site plan and just highlighted at the back of the image. So the proposed increase in lot coverage is solely due to a rear yard patio, which is a little bit unique. So this rear yard patio is 35.32 square meters in area, and it's situated approximately 0.55 meters above grade, my understanding based on the zoning interpretation is that it's therefore included in the calculation of the lot coverage. And this works out to a increase of lot coverage of 3.22% for the property. Next slide, please. So this is the west elevation. And again, what I've done on the right side of the screen is highlighted where that patio is. And the reason for the patio is my client wants to extend where the basement is, to extend essentially habitable space below the rear porch. And again, where that patio is located and how it's located above grade, because it's essentially an extension of the finished floor of the basement, as well as obviously the height of the basement. That's why it extends 0.55 meters above grade. I would note that if this coverage, because obviously the massing of the dwelling, just from a built form perspective, I would argue, doesn't really include that patio. It's not intended to be covered or significantly programmed in any way. So if that coverage in theory was not included in the massing of the dwelling, the coverage would be about 25.15%. Which is just slightly over the maximum required amount. Next slide, please. So this is just the north elevation or the front elevation of the dwelling. I will note my client has designed a dwelling that does consider some of the architectural character and designs within the neighborhood, which includes a number of recently constructed dwellings, which include high quality architecture and design. And I will note that existing trees located outside of the proposed dwelling footprint are largely proposed to be maintained, with the exception of one tree in the location of the proposed driveway. All municipal owned trees along Sandhurst Drive frontage, as well as the border trees adjacent to the site are being maintained. Next slide, please. So we have submitted a planning brief in support of the application. I've read the staff report, which supports and has no issues with the proposed variance. I would suggest before the committee that the single variance is minor in nature and does meet the 4 tests under the Act. That concludes my presentation. I'm before the committee should there be any questions. Thank you.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Demchek. Are there any questions of Mr. Demchek at this time or any items of clarification? Okay, I see none. If there hasn't been anyone who's called in or raised their hand to speak to this application, we'll take the matter into committee.
There is no phone calls at this time.
Very well. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, the presentation from Mr. Demchek, which was very helpful in understanding and explaining the nature of the variance and that the impact of the additional area that's counted into coverage being minimal to non-existent. I'm satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the Fort test, and as such, I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to two conditions, those being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated November 28th, 2022, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support. Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you, Mr. Demchik. Have a good night.
Thank you, members. Have a good night.
Application CAV 016 of 2023 at 508 Warminster Drive. Again, this is application CAV 016 of 2023 at 508 Warminster Drive. Please call 905-815-6095 if you're interested in speaking to the application, or simply raise your hand if you're already in attendance. Mr. Giordano, are you representing this application? I see your hand up.
Madam Chair, yes, I am, if you can hear me.
Now I can. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I do have a presentation that I submitted. Now, it's a series of simple slides. I can take you through it if you like. It is one variance item. It's RFA. Required is 40%. We're at 42.23%. The rest of the building is as of right in terms of height, side yard setbacks, all of the setbacks. I'll just take you through it really quickly since it's on the screen. Next slide, please. This is the home that's proposed for our clients. We're the designers and the authorized agent. Next slide, please. The house is a semi-trapezoidal with a little bit of a skew to it, but it is quite a long property, set just inside the corner lot. Next slide, please. Aerial view showing the rear of the property. There aren't too many trees to be concerned about. Next slide, please. 3D elevations of the front, sides, and rear. We've attempted to be sensitive to neighboring properties with the massing, reducing some of the heights and reducing some of the slopes at the front. Next slide, please. This is the way the house is positioned on the property. It is really just the RFA, so there aren't any yard variances or building height variances, just that single variance. Next slide, please. Some street view photos of the existing home. You'll see there's a good amount of clearance to the neighbor to the immediate right. There's a driveway there and a garage, an existing garage on the side. The house directly across from us is currently being built as a semi-modern structure. Next slide will show you some rear lot. Next slide, please. So these are rear lot conditions. The one in the lower right corner is looking directly towards the rear of the property. Large open rear yard, lots of space. We're pretty comfortable that the house fits properly on this property. That's effectively my presentation if you have any questions.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Giordano. Are there any items of clarifications or questions at this time of Mr. Giordano? Okay, I see none. If there's no one that's called in or raised their hand to speak to this matter, we'll take the matter into committee.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Flemington. Thank you.
Thank you. Having reviewed the applicant's submission, as well as the town's written staff report, which I do note is in support of the motion of the application rather, and also having taken into account the presentation made this evening by the applicant's agent, noting that there was no written or oral objections from the public, I am prepared to make a motion in support of the application as applied for, finding that it meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act, and there's no negative implications of this proposal. I would like to move the motion with the following 2 conditions. The first one being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated December 21st, 2022, and elevation drawings dated December 21st, 2022. And our second standard condition, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Flemington. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you,
Perfect.
Mr. Giordano.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Bye now.
Application CAV 017 of 2023 at 754 Bronte Road. Again, this is CAV 017 of 2023 at 754 Bronte Road. If there's anyone interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Otherwise, raise your hand if you're already in attendance.
Good evening, my name, Madam Chair and committee member. My name is Wajed Mansouri. I'm the engineer and the designer, and also the applicant authorized agent.
Go ahead, Mr. Wasiri.
This is an application, I'm sure it is in the file. This was a variance, which was this is a gas station, and is an existing gas station, which is pretty old, and that's going to be knocked down and rebuilt. And a variance was approved previously in September 2019. And after COVID, so this thing was delayed as far as the construction of this project. So the site is practically located on the east side of Bronte Road and south side of the QW highway. And currently there are existing entrances that you can make a left turn, but due to the discussion, we got all the approvals from the Ministry of Transportation, also from Region of Halton Conservation Authority. And during all the discussion, the site plan is practically approved. And this was in light of the expiring of the existing variance. We had to reapply, which is we're here today. In front of the site on Bronte Road, there's going to be a long median that's going to be built, and that's going to be restricting the traffic, and it's going to be for safety, will not be allowing the cars to make a left turn to go on Bronte North. So the site is going to be composed of 6 fueling station, 6 pumps with the overhead canopy. And also it's going to be, the store is going to be a combination of a C-store, convenience store, and a Tim Hortons with a drive-through. And the drive-through for Tim Hortons is not going to be, it's going to be within the site. So it's not going to be impacting or the traffic on Bronte Road. There's going to be a lot of landscaping on site. That is going to be new trees and bushes is going to be installed. And we have took into consideration all the access for barrier-free from the sidewalks on Bronte Road and within the site. Other than that, if there is any other questions, I will be glad to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mansour. Are there any questions or items of clarification at this time? Okay, I see none. If there isn't anyone who has called in or raised their hand to speak to this application, we'll take the matter into committee.
There is no phone calls at this time.
Very well. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, and having heard the presentation from the applicant, I'm satisfied that the proposed expansion in use is similar to the proposed for which it was used on the day that the bylaw was passed, and that the expansion of the legal non-conforming use does not have any adverse impacts on the neighborhood and is desirable for the appropriate development of the subject property. Accordingly, we'll put forward a motion of approval subject to two conditions, those being that the building be built in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if the permit has not been issued.
Very well. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? The application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Application CAV 186 of 2022 deferred from November the 15th of 2022 at 565 Weir Avenue. Again, this is CAV 186 of 2022 deferred from November the 15th at 565 Weir Avenue. If you're interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095 and staff will be standing by. Take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. Good evening.
Evening, Madam Chair.
I would like to try, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, Madam Chair, I did not mean to cut you off.
No, I was going to try to pronounce your name, but then I figured I'll...
No, give it a go. No, go. I love this.
Benskowski?
That's pretty good. Benchkovsky, but that's good.
Okay, Benchkovsky. Okay, thank you for allowing me to do that. Go ahead, sir.
All right, Madam Chair, this is a fairly straightforward application. We deferred this application back in November based upon planning's comments relating to the variance for the RFA. We've drastically reduced the floor area. In terms of the built form of the proposed dwelling, it is in excess of the side yard setback requirements, as well as the rear yard setback. It lines up with the front yards of both adjacent dwellings. The massing is what's envisioned in the official plan and really fits in with the area of newly developed two-story dwellings with two-car integral garages that is occurring kind of throughout the neighborhood. That's essentially it. It is, again, fairly straightforward. We're basically looking to add 20 square meters of floor area, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Very well, thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Benchkowski or items of clarification? I see none. If there's no one that is called in to speak to this application, we can take the matter into committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Flemington.
Having reviewed the applicant's revised submission, as well as noting that the town's written report was in support of the application, also taking into account that there were no negative submissions from the public or no negative written submissions. I'd just like to thank the applicant for revising the variance as per the previous comments that were made. So thank you for doing so. I find that as a result of that it does meet all 4 tests under the Planning Act. That it's minor in nature, it's keeping with development in the neighborhood, meets the general intent of the zoning bylaws and official plan, and is minor in nature. I would like to include the following 2 conditions with regards to the approval. The first one being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated November 19th, 2022, and the elevation drawings dated November 19th, 2022. And the second standard condition that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Flemington. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Yeah, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Have a good evening.
You as well, Madam Chair.
Application CAV 142 of 2022 deferred from September the 13th, 2022 at 2063 Vickery Drive. Again, that's CAV 142 of 2022 at 2063 Vickery Drive. You're still muted, Mr.
My apologies. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I did provide a PowerPoint presentation.
Staff will probably put it up right now. There we go.
Okay. So I'm Steve Kloss, planner with Glenn Schneier & Associates, and I'm here on behalf of the property owner to discuss the deferred minor variance application for 2063 Vickery Drive, which seeks to facilitate the development of a new single detached home. Next slide, please. So the property has an area of a little over a quarter acre and is currently developed with a one-story dwelling, which will be demolished. Generally located north of Rebecca Street and west of 3rd Line. And the surrounding area is almost exclusively developed with single detached homes. The property is designated residential low density by the Livable Oakville plan and is zoned RL2-0 by the town's zoning bylaw. And a single detached home is permitted by both. Next slide, please. So here's some renderings of the proposed dwelling. Top left is the view from Vickery Drive. Top right is the view from the rear yard, and at the bottom is the view from the neighboring lot to the west. It's proposed to be a 2-story dwelling with 5 bedrooms, a 2-car garage, and an uncovered porch in the rear yard. Next slide, please. So here's the site plan and an explanation of the proposed variances. So there are 2 variances proposed. The first relates to residential floor area, or RFA, which the total amount of permitted floor space, including all stories. So the maximum in this zone is 35% for a lot this size, and the proposal seeks to increase this to 36.71%, which is an increase of 1.71%. The second variance relates to lot coverage, which relates to the footprint. So the maximum for this zone is 25%, and the proposal seeks to increase this to 25.1%, an increase of 0.1%. So the original application, which was on the September 15th, 2022 agenda, sought to increase the RFA to 39.16% and the lot coverage to 29.98%. It also sought to increase the maximum height from 9 to 9.5 meters. So after reviewing the original staff report, the owner made the decision to defer the application, and we worked with town staff to adjust the plans to reduce the scale of the proposed variances. And this resulted in the floor area and coverage variances being reduced substantially and the height variance being removed entirely. Next slide, please. To put a neighborhood context, the immediate surrounding neighborhood is best described as an evolving community. The historic development tends to be smaller 1 to 1.5 story bungalows. However, a number of properties in the community have been redeveloped in recent years with homes of similar height and massing to the proposed dwelling. So here are a pair of examples of similar scaled houses on Vickery Drive. And if you were to drive around the neighborhood, which I'm sure you all have, you'd count dozens of similar dwellings. Next slide, please. So under the Planning Act, minor variances are required to satisfy these 4 tests. It's our opinion that the proposed variances meet the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw, are desirable, and are minor in nature. They'll facilitate the development of a permitted dwelling at a size and scale that's compatible with the existing community. And following the deferral and alterations to the design, the proposed variances are indeed minor by any interpretation of the word. Next slide, please. So I'll just conclude by saying that we agree with town staff that the proposal satisfies the 4 tests and kindly request that it be approved. Next slide, please. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Kloss. Are there any questions or items of clarification at this time? Okay, I see none. If no one is called in for this application with questions or interests, we'll take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit and having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, the submitted drawings and the presentation from the agent for the owner, I am satisfied with the requested variances that they conform to the 4 tests of the Act. I would commend the applicant for going back and working with staff to minimize the concerns, eliminating the height variance, and minimizing both the coverage and gross floor area variances to a much lesser degree, such that the impacts of the additional size would be negligible, to say the least. So on that basis, I will put forward a motion of approval, finding that the requested variance is conforming to the 4 tests of the Act, and that motion would be subject to conditions, those being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated December 7th, 2022, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Application CAV 140 of 2022, deferred from September the 13th of 2022 at 241 Cherry Hill Road. Again, it's CAV 140 of 2022, deferred from the September 13th at 241 Cherry Hill Road. If you're interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095, or alternatively, raise your hand if you're already in attendance. We do have 4 letters of support on record. Mr. Eagleman.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is David Eagleman, 900 the East Mall, Suite 300, and I'm a senior planner here on behalf of the property owners. Through you, Madam Chair, I don't have a formal PowerPoint presentation, but I can just provide some brief comments on the application for the committee's consideration.
Very well, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through you, Madam Chair, before getting into the specific variances we are requesting, we have deferred this application from the previously scheduled committee hearing on September 13th, 2022, in order to address concerns raised by planning staff. And we have since consulted with planning staff and have made revisions to the proposal to their satisfaction. And that is indicated within their report issued for this application on today's agenda. I find the recommended conditions from planning staff to be acceptable and have no issues with those being imposed by the committee should the committee choose to approve the application today. And I'm not aware of any concerns or objections from any town departments or relevant agencies, as well as any surrounding neighbors. And we have received signatures and support from some of the surrounding neighbors, including both immediately adjacent neighbors to the east and west, as well as the immediately adjacent neighbor to the rear at the north. And regarding the variances, variance number 1, which pertains to the maximum residential floor area ratio, or FAR, this application is actually very similar to the last application the committee heard, as well as a few others, but essentially we are requesting a increase to the maximum FAR ratio of only 1.1%, which results in an increase of 7.42 square meters, or approximately 80 square feet, which over 80 square feet over what is permitted as of right by the bylaw. And such a minor increase to the permitted floor area ratio will be practically imperceptible as compared to an as of right dwelling on the subject property, and will have little to no impact further than what the bylaw already contemplates on this property. There have also been a few other approvals for similar approvals for floor area ratios within the neighborhood. Such approvals include 255 Cherry Hill Road, which was approved for a residential FAR of 43.87%. Other decisions in the area have been summarized in a submitted cover letter dated January 6, 2023. And as such, the proposed floor area ratio will result in a dwelling that is in keeping with the existing character of the neighborhood and will fit harmoniously into the streetscape. Now, just briefly touching on variance number 2, which relates to the proposed front yard setback, if I could please ask staff to just pull up the survey of the existing property. And while that staff are pulling that up, I will just note that the required front yard setback is based on the existing front yard setback of the dwelling less 1 meter. So the requirement for front yard setback is based on what currently exists on the subject property today. And what currently exists on the subject property today is a single detached dwelling, which is set back further than both immediately adjacent dwellings. So the proposal will actually be bringing the dwelling more in line with the immediately adjacent dwellings to both the east and west, and will be more in keeping with the existing character along the street rather than what currently exists, because as I said again, the existing dwelling is set back further than both adjacent dwellings. And specifically, just to speak to that, because I do not see the survey up, but I will just note that the existing front yard setback of 245 Cherry Hill is 7.76 meters, and the existing setback of 235 Cherry Hill is 9.93 meters. So the proposed variance for front yard setback of 8.46 meters will result in a dwelling that is more in line and more consistent with the rest of the dwellings on the street. So based on the provided justification, I'm of the opinion that this proposal fits in with the existing and planned context for the neighborhood, is consistent with the redevelopment trends along Cherry Hill Road and throughout the broader neighborhood context. And for those reasons, I believe this application represents good planning and meets the 4 tests under section 45.1. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions. Through you, Madam Chair, I believe you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. I apologize for that. Thank you, Mr. Eagleman. Are there any items of clarification or questions at this time from the committee members? Okay, I see none. Do you still want you asked for the survey, right?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, I was hoping to show it during my presentation, but I think the point was understood anyway. As you can see now, just in reference to what I was talking about during my presentation, both dwellings on either side of the existing dwelling on the subject property are closer to the street than what currently exists on the subject property. So if you review the site plan, you'll see that the new dwelling is more in line with both adjacent dwellings.
Very well. Yes, we see your point now. If there aren't any questions or items of clarification, we can take the matter into committee if no one also has called in or requested to speak to the matter. We do recognize that you have letters of support from your neighbors, and those are on record. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having reviewed the applicant's submission as well as the town's written staff report with regards to the revisions that were made to this application, dealing with the comments that were presented to the applicant previously. I'd like to thank the applicant for working with the town staff with regards to amending what was proposed. I think that certainly results in a better application and one that does not have negative impacts within the neighborhood and within the neighbors. I also note that there were 4 letters of written support of the application that helps illustrate that point. Noting that there were no written or oral objections to this application. So I am prepared as a result to move a motion in support of the application as applied for, finding that it does meet all 4 tests under the Planning Act. And I would like to include the following 2 conditions. The first one, that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan, revised number 3, dated January 6, 2022, and elevation drawings revised number 3, dated January 6, 2022. And the second condition, our standard one, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Flemington. Is there discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee.
Have a good
have
evening.
a good night.
Okay, we have minutes to confirm for February the 8th, 2022. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. And motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. We are adjourned at 8:06 p.m. Madam Secretary.